Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of You Know What. So, because I'll probably put a title crawl before this with some music, I am going to talk about the extreme/forgotten theme. I'm going to continue this series, but this time I'm going to do them as kind of vignettes. I want to talk about several films that don't have a North American Blu-ray release proper, don't have any plans for one whatsoever at this time that I can discern from vast research on the good old internet. So, I'm getting a lot of messages here. So, but I'm not sure if any one of them qualifies for, a long video or even a half-hour video. Maybe I don't know them quite as intimately as some of the movies I've talked about. Some of them I haven't watched in a while, but I remember the effect they had on me, and I feel like they need to be released that way. So I've done movies kind of like that before, like Looking for Mr. Goodbar, that are like classics to me, that have fallen, in the cracks of all this, which is unfortunate, but that's to me, a very rich, powerful film. So it deserved its own video. And so far it's had a few hundred views and some likes. I'm really thankful for that because I really liked the way it came out. And I've always been very passionate about it and wanting to have like a official digital release. It's never even had an official DVD release, much less a Blu-ray. So I'm going to show you and talk about some DVDs I have, various kinds, in print, out of print. Some of them are region B. Again, ones that never had a proper, region A DVD release, much less a Blu-ray. So, just going to do short. I'm going to do 4. I've got kind of I'm going to do them in stages. This is going to be raw. This is going to be rough because I don't know everything, all the intimate details of all these movies. I can just tell you basically my impressions, the facts that I can remember, and basically why I think they should have that release. So the first one is a movie that is widely hated. Has been widely hated for many years. It's kind of what Stephen Pukalski of Shock Cinema, who I used to write for, would call an all-star embarrassment. He lumped movies like Candy and Skidoo in there, and this one. So it's like a trio of them came out, within the same time frame, into the 60s or early, beginning of the 70s. So you had a ton of old school and or leading man, woman kind of actors performing in a film that they were kind of awkward in, and they were kind of thrown in there just because of that. And there's like a bunch of them. Candy, of course, is a what Malcolm McLaren allegedly coined the phrase "fabulous disaster." And I've done a video on Candy. I talked about Candy and The Swimmer, but Candy is on Blu-ray, so that's why I did it. But Candy is that kind of film. Skidoo recently came out on Blu-ray. I have not acquired it yet. I no longer have the DVD. That's one I would definitely like to own and review. These are of varying qualities. So the most infamous, I think, one, for many reasons, and the most hated is this film here. So this is MYRA BRECKINRIDGE. And yes, that's Raquel Welch, Sex Goddess. That was the name of her box set that this came in. I didn't buy the box set. I bought them individually. They were cheaper that way. Fox did a series of the Raquel Welch, Sex Goddess series, and they did Fathom. They did which kind of a spy one, which is kind of a spy, has Toni Franciosa in it. I got that for like $3 at a dollar store unopened. It was nice. Fun movie, but not really something I needed permanently in my library, so I sold the DVD when I opened my eBay store. This one, of course, Then there's also Bandolero, which I thought was a good Western. Not great, but good, with Raquel and Dean Martin, and James Stewart. And they're all, in an interesting kind of uh, against type performances. It was a fun movie. That one I sold. I forgot the fourth one. That's going to drive me crazy. I don't know why I can't remember. Oh, well, I want to say Fantastic Voyage was in there, but I did not acquire that. I have not seen that in many years. I saw it on TV as a kid and it tripped me out. So really, it was like Fox had the rights to a lot of these, classic in this context, as in they're well known and they're in their time, and they've gone on to have some longevity. Maybe not Fathom, but anyway, but and notoriety, and in this case, infamy. This is the back of the DVD. I probably already showed you that. There's one film that I had on DVD with Raquel Welch. I think I had, yeah, that I sold also as one of the Warner Archive series. Um, and they're sitting on so many movies. They were sitting on so many movies, and I guess still are. And so Warner Archives was kind of like their way of sating the fans by giving them all kinds of cult movies and classic movies, more mainstream movies from their vault, a whole spectrum of movies. And a lot of them were DVD ROMs or DVD Rs. So they were burnt. I mean, they were burnt from a digital master that was, of course, mastered from the original film. So they weren't like a bootleg or lame or anything, or VHS quality, but it looks great. But they weren't really, part of their main line. The main way they promoted them was through their website, and then also, to an extent, some stores would feature them. When I worked at Manifest Discs, we had a display. We would do this occasionally. The company FYE owned us. Like one display we had was like all of these Hanna-Barbera cartoons and characters, like DVDs about Adam Ant and Herculoids and all these cats that I can't remember their names of, the Hawk guy, and anyway, the stuff that wasn't Scooby Doo or the Flintstones, but adjacent to their time frame, but never got kind of as big, but are well loved by certain fandoms. We also had an end cap of the Warner Archives. So some movies I've been looking for quite a while on DVD came out in that series. One was Hitman, uh, by that guy. I can't think of his name. It was produced by Gene Corman, Roger Corman's brother. He produced a very small handful of interesting movies for New World. Hitman was directed by my brain, the guy who did Gross Point Blank. It'll come to me. Armitage, I believe, is George Armitage, perhaps. Uh, yeah, and I also get him mixed up with the guy who wrote Lord Love a Duck. I think that's Axelrod. I get those two mixed up. Anyway, Armitage did Hitman in the early '70s during the blaxploitation wave. That's the kind of movie that deserves its own video. So I'm not going to talk much about it. I have written extensively about Hitman. I'm not going to say it was anything incredible or deep or particularly original and insightful, but I have, and they've been published in actual, you know, paper publications in the past in my brief career as a cult film magazine reviewer and journalist. And I've also, done little things which kind of cannibalized from those articles on some websites, including when I was a moderator of that shall be unnamed, large cult movie group that a lot of us were or are, not me, but some of you guys are members of. Uh, so, um, so anyway, so that's Warner Archives. I'm not sure how I got on that because I was talking about Fox. Now, Fox, of course, has now been acquired by Disney, and they're not called 20th Century Fox anymore. They're called Hmm. 20th Century Fox Studios. They have a slight name change. I don't remember what it is. They still have Searchlight, which is a offshoot that's indie movies or quasi semi indie movies, which I've talked about that phenomenon in other videos, which you probably haven't seen. But they're on this channel. MYRA Breckinridge. Let's get back to Fox. So anyway, All Star Embarrassment. So this is a Raquel Welch now. The people who are prominently billed, the credits say Mae West, John Huston, and Raquel Welch. All right, so actually the star absolutely is Raquel. The other movie I was trying to remember that I think was the one in archives, but I think again it was Olive Films that I really like with Raquel is Hanny Calder, with Christopher Lee and Robert Culp. It's a really cool revenge western. It's just kind of one of those little sleepers. Not an incredible movie, but one of her more serious parts, and one that kind of fits into the kind of pulp mythology of Western adventure films. And some writers, such as Rick Lay, have done scholarly articles tying aspects of it in with other westerns. And he had a book called Major Sabbath, uh, and that's where he kind of ties together all these different westerns, mainly spaghetti westerns, but also Hanny Calder and some other things. A lot of Django oriented stuff. Um, but anyway, Myra Breckinridge. Okay, so had Mae West, John Huston, Farrah Fawcett. Now she was not famous then. This was a few years before Charlie's Angels. I believe Charlie's Angels started in 1976, I think. And of course, Ted V. Michaels has claimed that it was a ripoff of his film The Doll Squad, which to me is one of the most entertaining, cheesy, low budget action adventure films ever made. Um, and actually, the main character, which was played by June McConnell, later really famous, famous in soap opera circles. She had a nice long run on Santa Barbara and several roles before that. But Judith McConnell was quite a bit younger than her, and Tura Satana and some other actresses played the squad of action heroines who were trying to stop Michael and Sarah, who's going to blow up the world or something. And I think he was romantically interested in her. And her character was named Sabrina, and she wasn't like the sexy, flamboyant, glamorous one. She was like the brainy, reserved one, and that character really essentially was stolen and repurposed as Sabrina in Charlie's Angels, who more or less was the field leader under Charlie of the Angels, played by Kate Jackson from Dark Shadows, and that brought her great fame. I didn't really enjoy. I did watch Charlie's Angels a lot. I was a little kid. Give me a break. I didn't really love it, but I did like her. I thought her performance of her character was cool. I never got into Farrah Fawcett's character or acting. Later, she was a better actress much later. Um, but this is before she was kind of big. Okay, somebody named Roger Herren. That's an old school actor. I don't know who that is. Calvin Lockhart, a now deceased black actor. He was in several blaxploitation movies. He was in The Beast Must Die, uh, Come Back Charleston Blue, I think, or maybe the first one. Cotton Comes to Harlem. One of the two with Gravedigger Jones in it. I think he was the villain, possibly. Um, I have a good friend I've talked about before and patron of the channel, Sean Lee Levin. He can correct me on a lot of this stuff. So, Sean, if you feel like adding some commentary in the comments, I would really enjoy it. Correcting me or supplementing what I'm saying, because I've forgotten a lot of stuff. Uh, I've forgotten more than anyone will remember, but um, Calvin Lockhart was in a blaxploitation film called Melinda. It was very intense. And then he was in this jaunty one called The Baron. I have copies of all these movies. My blaxploitation DVD collection is still pretty large because most of them are not on Blu-ray yet, and I still want to watch them periodically. But I'm weeding them out. I'm gradually selling them. Uh, and of course, Calvin Lockhart was part of the Twin Peaks. He played one of the woodmen in a scene, a really, really famous scene in Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me, taking place upstairs at the convenience store when Philip Jeffries, played by David Bowie, encounters these people. And that the origin of that convenience store and the woodman and those whole milieu, those creatures, and what happens to Jeffries was explored, in great depth in Twin Peaks: The Return. Really brilliant. But anyway, Calvin Lockhart, he couldn't take part in the Twin Peaks: The Return. I think he had already died, or he died around that time. Because if you play in Twin Peaks, you're doomed. Almost everybody's dead now. John Carradine, of course. There's some other ones. I wonder if I can find some of Tom Selleck. Well, before he became well known, he plays like a boy toy to Mae West. Mae West was in her 70s when she did this. This is like an over-the-top camp film. I didn't mention the other star, who's really the co-star with Raquel, because they play the same character. So this is based on a novel by Gore Vidal, who was a pretty insightful political analyst, but also kind of a scandalous novelist, or maybe aspired to be, or accidentally was scandalous. So MYRA Breckinridge was his novel where basically Myron Breckinridge, a gay man, turns into Myra Breckinridge, goes to Hollywood, cashes in on some connections Myron had to some people in Hollywood, and basically tries to become like a star, a producer. And she kind of has this, kind of superhuman like quality. I used to have a copy of the novel Myra Breckinridge. I lost it in my last move, unfortunately. A nice little mass market paperback, black and white cover. I thought it was a cool book. It's hard to understand the ending, and it's even harder to understand the way it was done in the film. Now, my good buddy Bill White, who is kind of a savant of all films, in my opinion, a genius of cinema, towering genius of cinema criticism. I'm not being facetious. I really mean that. He basically said this movie was just feces. So, Bill has some strong opinions. Now, so do I, as you guys know. So, I love MYRA Breckinridge. It's not one of my favorite movies, but I have a very great fondness for it. Me and an ex-girlfriend that I lived with in the 90s, who I don't have any fondness for anymore, collected a lot of movies, and we got a lot of stuff from Video Search in Miami. And MYRA Breckinridge was out of print on VHS, and we couldn't find it for rent anywhere here because we had a problem a lot in Charlotte during that period. And so we got it from Video Search in Miami. And for Video Search, it was a fairly good print because, they were known for kind of dodgy, several generations removed dupe prints, dupey. But, they were influential. They're really where a lot of us cut our teeth on collecting these kind of movies and actually seeing them for the first time. So we got a copy of MYRA Breckinridge. We also got Candy. We got El Topo from there. It was the first time we'd seen any of these movies. Tristana. We had a really epic. And then when I started writing, I got quite a few free to review from Tom Weiser, who knew me and who ran Video Search in Miami. And my cat's trying to knock over my kombucha. He's rubbing against it, I guess, as it's cold. Usually he rubs against one thing. I can't predict what he's going to do. So Tom Weiser, Video Search. Yeah, it was an incredible time. But in hindsight, nobody could afford to blind buy all these movies with bad quality now. Because now the same movies, most of them are on Blu-ray for half the price that we paid for those videotapes. But you got to remember, in the 90s, the cost of living was much lower. So even though we were making less money per hour at our jobs than we are now, we were able to sustain renting a place and sometimes squandering on this kind of stuff. That would be unthinkable today. I have to watch every purchase I make. Luckily I own my house, but that's another sad story, and I don't want to go into it right now. But I'm having major, deep, heavy problems along the lines I've mentioned before. I've been mentioning it all year long. I kind of felt it coming, or I could avoid it or fix it somehow, but it's yeah, I can't. So I mean, maybe I can, but it's almost too late. So that's a tale for another day. So let me wrap up MYRA BRECKINRIDGE. I barely started it. Sorry about the long-winded. I like talking about this stuff, though. I like doing that live stream of Dawn of the Dead. So if you like me, if you like the way I present this stuff, um, cool. You know, you'll get more of it. If you don't like it, you probably won't watch it, or you'll unsubscribe. You might give me a thumbs down. If you belong to that cult movie group that I once knew, they all have a hate on for me still, and will try to, you know, I forgot what the term is, but because people use it a lot stupidly about IMDb, but basically where you're voting down something out of hate for that person. People do it on Amazon constantly, you know, to their enemies, and then they upvote their friends, and you know, people run in these cliques, and that's the way it goes. So I'm not really part of any of that anymore. I mean, yeah, I'm not. I mean, any of the ones I've alluded to just now, I'm not a part of anymore. So I'm a lone wolf, man. Hard road. So MYRA BRECKINRIDGE, this is what it says in the back. Weird, wild, sexy, strange. Meet MYRA BRECKINRIDGE. You'll never forget her. So I'm going to try to read the back because it's kind of hard for me to read small print anymore. I need to really get glasses. See, I brought all this lighting, but it's all front lighting, so I'm used to the back lighting where I can read shit. So I'm going to give this a shot. Sex goddess Raquel Welch was at the height of her big screen fame when she starred as Myra in this offbeat cult favorite, considered one of the most notorious films ever released by a major studio. Adapted from the best-selling novel by Gore Vidal, who later denounced the film. It starred an oddball ensemble, I would say melange in person, of legendary old-time Hollywood stars, Mae West, John Huston, and promising newcomers, Farrah, Fawcett, and Tom Selleck, and featured film critic and non-actor Rex Reed in a pivotal leading role. So that's what I was leading up to, and I kept getting derailed by myself. Rex Reed is Myron. And though the movie takes place after, well, in the very beginning, kind of intro-ish thing, there's a sex change. And John Carradine is the surgeon, you know, a brilliant, crazy surgeon. Kind of like James Coburn was a brilliant, crazy, and horny surgeon in Candy, you know, and it's shot in a similar way. You know, but actually, I really like the way the lensing is on this, especially in that first scene. There's somewhere they use a lot of I don't know if it's anamorphic, but they kind of stretch the image out. Again, Bill White would be able to tell me about this. There's a term, and I'm not a technician, but I know a bit. But it's a really cool. The opening of the movie to me just looks really fucking cool. So, of course, it's very unlikely, especially with the surgical technology of 1970 or whatever, that someone would be able to transform Rex Reed so completely into Raquel Welch. Now, in the book, you can use your imagination. Even with his descriptions, you can go, okay, well, yeah, this is possible. He's explaining it. The movie, you just kind of have to take the word for it because the script is kind of inscrutable. And as Myra trips through these adventures I mentioned in Hollywood, Myron, Rex Reed, will appear like as her kind of conscience, or not a deus ex machina, but a Greek chorus. There's a literary term I'm grasping for, but like the film term I mentioned earlier, my brain can't process it currently. So, so if you watch my channel at all, at least maybe you can get comedic value out of it, out of my oddness and incompetence. So, essentially, yeah. So basically it's her old self talking, because the whole deal was that Myron wanted to be a woman, and so Myra was like a creation of Myron in his head, the ideal woman, the goddess, the powerful, alpha female, you could say. And so then he got the surgery done and somehow became it physically. And yeah, so and it's kind of the story is told narratively and in kind of weird little scenes that may take place in somebody's mind between Myron and Myra. It's all over the map with these experimental kind of ways of telling this story. Um, Early in the film, maybe at the beginning of it, it's after the surgery. Raquel is narrating, and she's like, "Who is Myra Breckinridge? Myra Breckinridge is a dish." So what the hell does that mean? So a dish means, a sexy, luscious chick, of that time period, using that terminology. Um, Actually, dish was more probably time of John Huston's period than Raquel Welch, but um, John Huston, I think, is named Buck something, and he's like a cowboy actor, producer. He's really good. John Huston hams it up, and of course, he's got that incredible voice. When he's serious with it, he's amazing. I mean, really powerful, like in that movie In the Beginning about the Bible, which I think he directed too. But his narration is incredible, and he narrated the Rankin Bass. I don't know if he narrated The Hobbit. He narrated Return of the King, and I'll never forget when I was a little kid. I would hear the narration and be like, "In the chambers of Mordor." Oh, and also he appeared as the lawgiver in Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Same thing, an incredible voice. So he was good at making other kind of cartoonish, goofy voices. So he's in Candy too, and he's everywhere, man. Uh, and of course he was a brilliant director. Most of his movies are very mainstream, but some were like extremely weird and off the chain, off the grid, like Wise Blood, which has become kind of a cult classic, um, and rightfully so. I love John Huston, and as an actor, I love him too. Uh, so it's a bit inscrutable film. It's basically Myron, the spirit of Myron, the voice of Myron that's still in her head, that's kind of looking on as she, through her body, as Myra, because they talk to each other occasionally, is enacting this. I don't want to say revenge, but proving there's kind of a subplot, and I alluded to it earlier. She has I forgot a lot of it. She has a connection to somebody in that scene, and she's trying to claim some like money or position and take everybody by storm, and she doesn't really care who she hurts. And finally, it becomes like a sexual thing. The male and female side, the gay and straight side of her, her, falls in love or lust with two different people. So the Myron side falls in love with the Farrah Fawcett character, who's very fluffy and shallow. So Myra kind of falls in lust and also kind of resentment and hatred for Farrah Fawcett's boyfriend. I can't remember the name of the actor. And he's like a stupid stud, and he's kind of like, "What's a man? What does a man do? He balls chicks." So he's making clear that he's a heterosexual cisgendered male of 1970. Now I am too. Not well up to 2022. I concur with those sentiments, but I think there's some other things to being a man, and now in this era the lines are blurring, and I would never use that as a weapon against gay people or homophobic bullshit, but this character does, and of course, so that triggers Myra. So she, with the help of this weird dildo that's kind of like with a saddle that she puts on like a horse, she sodomizes him. Um, he orgasms, and she has a big orgasm. And mind you, again, this isn't super graphic, but it's more than obvious what's happening. Believe me. Uh, Meanwhile, she's kind of toying with Farrah Fawcett, and because there you bring up the bisexual part of the bi-curious side of the Farrah Fawcett character. So Mae West is like her mentor. She's like an aging star. She does a musical ensemble number. It's this song, "Too Hot to Handle," "Too Hard to Handle," which was later popularized by the Black Crowes many years later. I had no idea it wasn't an original Black Crowes song when I got this movie, and I was like, Mae West wrote this song. I mean, I didn't think she wrote it, but it's like Mae West recorded this before the Black Crowes, like 20 years almost before the Black Crowes. and she vamps it up. She really vamps up, her persona, camps it up, also. And I think she's pretty funny in this. It's not her best work, but it's near the end of her life. She also did one called Sextet. That was after this with Timothy Dalton, I believe, right after maybe. Yeah, it's a couple of years later. She was getting really old. Sextet was like maybe mid 70s. I do have a copy burnt of that from rarelust.com. And I have watched it once, but it didn't really grab me so much. But I wanted to have it in my collection. I wanted to finally see it. And I forgot who's in that one. Well, I think Tom Selleck might be in that one too. Timothy Dalton is in it, and I want to say I want to say Ringo Starr, but I could be wrong. He was one in these movies, so he was in Candy. And he was definitely a star back then, literally a star. And so that's it, man. MYRA BRECKINRIDGE, because the movie kind of peters out, Now Calvin Lockhart plays a very gay black man, and he's really a trip. And so there's a lot of cliches, a lot of stereotypes, but I don't personally believe Gore Vidal was homophobic. I think he was gay or bisexual himself. I could be wrong about that. But I do think he's sending up and satirizing the campy side of Hollywood and the homosexual, gender fluid, as we call it now, subtext of those films, and criticizing the macho of those films. It's embodied by John Huston as the cowboy guy, and then there's the stud guy that she rapes, and so yeah, I mean, I'm with him on that. I think it's great. It's really like deflating, pardon the pun, and just crushing that kind of man. So in a way, this movie is more relevant than ever now. But it is campy. It is of its time. I don't know how Gen Z would react to MYRA BRECKINRIDGE. I'm curious. So you guys should go out and try to watch it, or millennials or whoever. I mean, Gen X if you haven't seen it. But like I said, some of my boomer friends who were of age to see this movie when it first came out kind of hate it. So that's cool. But so I've gone on a long time, so I'm probably not going to be able to do 4 movies unless I go on for like 2 hours. Sigh. So this might be a 2-part video. Okay. So the ending of MYRA BRECKINRIDGE, he has a sex change back to Myron. I don't know. Is it a dream? How is that possible? What? So yeah, Rex Reed his acting is terrible. And of course he was gay in real life, but he was like everyone back then. And I'm not blaming them because it was people were homophobic and hated gay people, so they had to like play the game in Hollywood and music industry, and famous people, celebrities had to do that. People we knew obviously were gay. They denied it, and a lot of times they said to me very disparaging things about being gay. Elton John comes to mind. Who's one? George Michael, Liberace. I mean, not I'm saying they slagged gay people, but they kind of act like, oh no, of course I'm not gay, and then they try to pretend, and it was embarrassing. In hindsight, it's sad they felt they had to do that. Rex Reed was just a film critic. He wasn't a movie star. There's no reason for him to hide being gay, but he was one of those vociferous deniers. Closeted gay men are kind of have a certain psychosis to me, and I've met quite a few, and they kind of put me on edge because I'm just like, they hate themselves so much and they take it out on everyone else. And it's like, I'm sad that they hate themselves, but don't take it out on me, man. Be gay. And I'm glad people are doing that. I recently worked with a young guy who is like this. He is extremely flaming and flamboyant and just gay as hell. But he's a Christian, and he just won't quite admit that he's gay. He doesn't want to say it out aloud. He's kind of playing a game. He's like 18, 19, 20. he got fired for stealing, but he comes in the store all the time trying to steal and, hugging people and kissing people. He's a trip, as they say, as I say. His name is Franklin. I don't know his last name, so he can't sue me. But that was the problem with Rex Reed. And Rex Reed was a really harsh critic. He said a lot of nasty and unfair things about movies, but he wasn't a dumb person. And I think he plays along with this movie. I think the casting is definitely stunt casting. And in that regard, it's good. It's just he really, unlike almost everyone else in the movie, some would argue Raquel's acting is terrible. I don't agree. I think she's very good in this. Farrah Fawcett's acting is kind of borderline awful, and so is Tom Selleck, but their characters are morons, so it doesn't really matter. But Rex Reed, yeah, his character is so key into the whole thing. You want to hear what his character's thinking and contrast parallel with MYRA, Raquel Welch over here, because it's like happening in their subconscious. But every time he opens his mouth, he's so annoying. And again, he's gay, and see, that's just it. He's playing a character that was gay that wanted to be a woman. Yet in real life, he denied he was gay, and that's kind of like Brad Davis, who was in Carell. Like near the end of his life, that was like his outing movie. Really, was Carell, by Fassbinder, Rainer Werner Fassbinder, one of the towering giants of cinema of all time, one of my gods. And Carell is like to me the most brilliant and beautiful homoerotic film ever made. And it doesn't give me an erection or anything, but it's wild. It trips me out. I love watching movies like The Other. They don't threaten me because I know who I am and I don't care. I think Narcissist comes to mind. That's a very beautifully shot, gay themed film. Of course, Kenneth Anger's films carry that subtext through them. There's another one, Narcissus. Oh man, I wish I. Well, Funeral Parade of Roses is kind of like that. I have that on Blu-ray. I may review that. That's a Japanese movie, so we're showing how transgender guys in Japan would act during that period. And that, of course, is just a great era of Japanese cinema anyway. And it kind of reminds, Funeral Parade of Roses kind of reminds me of a couple of other films. One, which is a famous quote or band or some pop culture phrase. Oh, God. But it originated as the title of this movie. So if you can help me out, please do that. I was thinking of, oh, man. Yeah, my brain's all messed up. So I won't go any further than that and embarrass myself because I'm really mess it up. Because there's a guy I wanted to talk about who did one of those movies named, see, I can't remember his name. Like, he did Burst City, but I can't remember the other movies. Pretty famous cult movies or infamous. Somehow that came to mind, one of his early punk kind of movie, punk rock kind of gang movies. But also this other one, it's a motorcycle movie. It's a biker movie. And you would know the phrase immediately if I said it, but it originated as the title of this movie. So I'm sorry I can't remember it. I could probably look it up in my biker films list probably and find it. But so anyway, that was a period of a lot of experimentation on all levels. So there was a flood of movies about all kinds of subcultures and disenfranchised people and people trying to empower themselves. So I don't know if MYRA BRECKINRIDGE is that kind of movie or not. If Gore Vidal hated it, then yeah, maybe it is. Not that kind of movie. Maybe it fails. But anyway, I guess I'm only going to do this one. I've kind of gone off course as I sometimes do. I have 3 others. I don't know if each one they're in video or if I'll do 3 in one video. But I've completed another episode of Extreme / Forgotten. And I actually, even though I forgot tons of things, I remembered a lot more things about this than I realized. And I guess kind of dug into it and analyzed it more than I thought I'd be able to. And probably to a lot of people more than it ever would deserve. But that's kind of one of the purposes of this show, is to say, let's look at these films through a different, pardon the fucking pun, let's look at these through a different lens. Let's go, what does this mean in this context? And, is there a political aspect to this? Is there a psychosexual aspect to this? What context was this created in? What does it mean today? What's the psychology of it? Is there a spiritual element to it? And basically dig into the themes, the psychological aspects of the film, but also the formal, the technical aspects, the visual aspects, because it is cinema. But I dig a lot. Guess I dig a lot more into the story and the narrative, even though a lot of movies I cover here don't really to a lot of people don't really have very solid narrative, and maybe to a lot of people terrible narrative and nonsensical. But see, that's just it. I somehow maybe I impose what I'm seeing upon those films, but I can glean a narrative from a film, like a film that has a fractured and unsatisfying plot structure, because it's a vibe. And to me, that's what cinema is. It's like there's a sensory vibe because it's your eyes and your ears, music, sound, and image. Uh, you know, um, it it's not like a book, but it has some elements of a book or a play. And I think at its best, it can combine all those elements, all those different art forms, and transcend them all and combine them into something just so immediate. Like you're looking at a window into another world. And when I watch movies, especially like from the 60s and 70s, it's like, and as I get older, even the 80s, even though I remember the 80s very well, um, it's like entering a different world. Now I experienced the 80s, but like I didn't really experience the 70s. I was too young to really, you know, and I wasn't around in the 60s. So it was like fascinating to me. It's like a window into, the beginning of Sweet Movie, a window into reality, a breath of cold air from another world. That was the Crazy Daisy Show tagline in the Sweet Movie, but that's kind of one of my favorite quotes of all time. Because it describes so many things that I enjoy. So anyway, enough of this kind of Dada-esque film criticism. I'm going to go ahead and split, and I will do some more. Got a little stack here, and I'm happy that I got to do this. And um, I'm having a lot of problems, so this is a good cathartic thing for me. And I am surrounded by monsters. I've got Frankenstein back here and this King Kong box. I've got the model over there. That was left behind by one of my roommates. That's the one I'm selling, but I haven't listed it yet. So anyway, take care. Love you guys. Bye.